Recording in progress.
All right, and no, thank you. So we got the recording in progress for the Traffic Management Advisory Committee, Wednesday, January 11th at 7 p.m. Calling this committee to order. Going to go around and do a roll call. Justin McClellan, chair and present. And accountant for Rain Hoyland. Here. Tom Ryder. Lieutenant McGrath. Here. Rebecca Tarantino. Here. Donna Mullen.
Here.
Barry McNeely. Here. And Gus Durson. Here. And Bob Giacolo is supposed to be on here, but he's not here.
I took him off because it wasn't. He told me it wasn't coming.
Oh, that's okay. Got it. Okay, that's perfect. Excellent. All right. So we do have a quorum. Let's see. Okay. So we're going to have. Has everybody looked through the minutes from December 7th? Any comments, corrections? If not, the only thing I saw was Barry McNeely was listed as present, but I think he was absent. Yes, so if we could just make that correction to just move that to members absent. That's all I saw. Anyone else have any comments, concerns, additions, subtractions? Hearing none, and make a motion to accept the minutes. Second with the amendments. Second by Gus. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? Only one abstention, and we're good to go. Oh, that was Barry there actually. All right. So at this point, I guess we can talk about the status report. There were some items on other business that we wanted to mention, but we'll figure that depending on petitioners if they come here. So the status report.
Okay, I have a couple things on Bob Wilson. First of all, the Mark Tree Road curve ahead sign with speed tab has been installed. Also, there's been a request to put out to Ryan's department, highway department, for the left turn yield sign on Parish Road at Hoyton Street. We talked, that's a preliminary before we do the full formal. That those two things have been taken care of. I also received a little bit of items from Gus on the crosswalk policy in Brookline. I was looking it over. It looks pretty good. I don't know if we can have time now to discuss it, but it's sure. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
So that, and it looks pretty good.
Okay.
It looks pretty good to, basis.
Sure.
Template kind of.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back to the first item on High Rock. I noticed the curve sign, and I thought that marked on Mark Tree.
Yes, I'm sorry.
My instinct was to think that was too low on the road, meaning too far down. I thought when we had where the petitioner lives was up by where those emotionally signs are, your children live here, et cetera. And there is just before the larger curve. I think there's like a larger curve and then it goes and it's a smaller curve. And I think it's announcing the smaller curve toward the bottom of the hill. Okay. And my thought, at least what I was thinking, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, and the other members.
I haven't been up there yet today, but.
I have not seen it either.
So my thought was it would be higher up as you're approaching the curve to come, like you start to head down the hill, and then there's like a what's the street? Oakcrest.
Oakcrest.
Yes, where the Oakcrest dumps. I thought it was going to be closer to that intersection because that actually is showing you the curve, and then that's where people are gaining speed.
Yeah.
I'll take.
Don't get me wrong. I think down by where you live, where at that Oak, there's still a higher thing of speed. So maybe I'm not even saying, maybe this is something that we want to bring up to, this is maybe where the radar speed sign would be, perhaps, or something like that further up to indicate, they can really catch the speed.
So I haven't looked at, I have not looked at it yet.
So
just put up
perhaps reevaluating that either through the final location of the curve and the speed tab, perhaps will be moved higher, or we use the one extra radar sign that we have. We're going to put on Forest. We put there closer up, higher up, so it actually you can leave the sign installed where it is, but put the other one higher up.
Interesting. I haven't seen it.
Like I said, I have to take a look at it.
No, I know
read
it's
it
one
down,
of
so
them went
I'll
in
take a
today,
peek.
so why don't we reevaluate that, see if the sign will be fit for purpose, and then we can talk about it by, next meeting.
And we do have the speed radar signs available silver.
Yep.
Our vendor is switching over to hardwire.
Yep.
Forest, so we've already
So
pulled
both
one
of
in. We're gonna do both.
Okay.
Oh,
We will one up immediately.
Yep.
That's gonna take months to hook it up though. That's part of the
Yeah,
challenge.
there's like a Verizon thing or yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then we'll do the one closest to Babs.
Okay, so we potentially have two.
Two.
Okay. Would the committee want to actually even discuss implementing, because I know we were talking before about criteria. No matter what, that road has the criteria.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the number of vehicles, the speed, we've done the survey on it, and the study on it. So, would anyone want to, I would support a motion to install one of the radar speed signs on High Rock. Mark Tree going down south. Down.
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to install a speed radar sign on Mark Tree heading south.
So before the curve, before Oakcrest,
Yes.
yes. Okay. So and whatever applicable that you guys find in terms of sun, whatever that is, I think that's, so we have a motion. I second that motion.
Rebecca lives on Mark Tree Road, perhaps it might be better somebody else would make the motion. It's a conflict of interest.
Sure, okay. All right, we have Gus to make the motion. I will second that motion.
To abstain from voting.
You know, it's on your street, so yeah, I think it would probably be a good idea.
Okay, that's fine. So we have a motion. That's fine. We can do an abstention. So Gus has made a motion to install a radar speed sign before Oakcrest on Mark's Tree. I second that motion. Any discussion on the matter?
So these are about some solar power.
Yeah.
So it's easy to, if you ever have to,
We can move them around.
that's much easier than excavation.
Oh, yeah, no excavation.
Sure. Yes. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we're going to go for a vote. All in favor of installing the motion on the table?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. We will install that speed sign. That's appropriate. Thank you. And then we can discuss, because I know some of the petitioners are here, we can discuss some of the other matters at the end after item number 7.
The other, okay,
Yeah, the other things we're going to discuss, I just want to kind of move forward. So we can move to item number 4. We have up at our first petitioner is speed regulation on Dedham Ave. Jackie Wolf. Hello there. The podium.
The podium?
Podium. It's going back to college. It's like,
Oh, man. All right, when you talk about future meetings, don't have people stand up at a podium. It's very intimidating.
If you would like.
I do it all the time for work, but just for future reference,
Sure.
take in consideration that you don't ask people to have to stand up in front of everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces, and thank you to town representatives and the committee for taking up this issue, and for many of you who've helped in preparation for this discussion. So I've been before you twice before on this topic. The first time was in 2018, again in 2020, and now we are here again in 2023. I have 2 questions for the committee. The response to the first really informs the second. And the first, it's noted on the meeting business speed regulation. Really, it's this question of, as a town, this committee, the kind of the bodies that be agree that driving 40 miles per hour on Dedham Ave between DeFazio Field and Webster is too fast, regardless of the speed limit, regardless of, everything else. The idea that people are legally driving 40 miles per hour on Dedham Ave. And currently outside our home on Dedham Ave, there is a posted speed limit of 40 miles per hour. And studies have shown that the average pedestrian struck by a driver traveling 20 miles per hour will survive about 90% of the time, while only 40% will survive if they're struck by someone doing 30. Said another way, in collisions at 30 miles per hour, about 1 in 5 people outside of vehicle, people walking, kids playing, bicycling, will not survive. And for older people, the odds are significantly worse, as well as children. At 40 miles per hour, 80% of crashes result in death. That percentage gets even bigger for pedestrians who are very young, like my children who are 3 and 5, who are older, who have different mobility needs, and particularly if you're struck by large cars, pickup trucks, and SUVs. As we all know, that's a popular route for all of our large vehicles, including 18-wheelers that are coming into our town all day, every day. So my first kind of question before we can even talk about, okay, what next, or solutions or speed regulations, is a question to this committee, to the town, that if do we agree that 40 miles per hour is not appropriate speed, given the context that it's a neighborhood, it's thickly settled, it's at Pollard Middle School entrance, it's at DeFazio Field, and there's only one sidewalk. So people are crisscrossing the street and running across the street where you're legally allowed to go 40 miles per hour, and where people do. So that's my question for the committee.
I have a question first.
Please.
So can you, so you've been before us twice before.
Yes.
I remember you, but I don't remember why. So can you,
On the same issue.
so is it the same issue, speed, were there specific issues, and remind me, were you at Bradford?
I
Where
live
are you?
on Dedham Ave,
Right. At
close to Bradford, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the issue before was just that the speed was, there wasn't a different issue, it was just speeds on Dedham Ave last time.
Correct.
Okay.
They have, yeah, but during those meetings, do we have any history of that?
Yeah.
Was anything said?
So I don't think at that point, as I recall, there was an individual on the committee that was talking about a large arduous process to change a speed zone, a marked speed zone, and spoke about the process to change that was significantly more than, let's say, now DOT has streamlined the process to be able to reevaluate a state's limit that is set by the state center, that we can certainly work with and negotiate to drop that. But yes, that was the town engineer at the time, was not someone that was open to making changes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I had never, just for the record, I had never received any follow-up.
Is
One other, sorry.
Dedham Ave, just for clarification, is a state highway?
It is,
correct?
it's actually a town road, completely controlled and maintained by
You
the
work in
town.
transportation.
So
am I remembering this correctly?
I'm sorry?
You work in transport.
I do
It
work in
has
the
a
field of
placard of-
transportation.
Okay. Yeah.
It is a Needham town street.
Needham maintains, actually MassDOT's going to rehabilitate the road to some.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with care and control
Yeah,
and,
I
and
understand.
maintenance. That's the state offering additional resources to communities.
So
Yeah.
my understanding is there a new process that, because you work for MassDOT, that you could give us some information so we could. Yeah, we weren't aware of, but if there are changes, that way we
Yeah.
could look at it, review it, make sure we're acting due diligence.
Sure, 1000%. I mean, if we get to the point where we agree that we don't want 18-wheelers going 40 miles per hour in our neighborhood, then like absolutely, then that's the second part of the question. Okay, now what do we do? But it was never clear to me if there was consensus that the town says, yeah, I think absolutely trucks and cars should be going
think
that
it's-
speed in this context.
I think it's slightly more difficult than what you're stating, and they only ask that from an educational perspective. How do we educate outside of signage enforcement? We've set 40 miles an hour on Dedham Ave, a straightaway coming off a highway. I get what you're saying, but 40, I don't know if 40 is unreasonable on that roadway from the way I'm trying to think of how the motoring public works and to re-educate the public to now drop their speed by 10. How do we do that?
Totally possible. But do we agree that 40 miles per hour is too high? Because that's the most important thing.
Why does everyone have to come to a consensus on that?
Oh, or just decision, because I feel that I have not gotten a response in the past to a solution because there was still debate about whether that was too high of a speed.
I don't know that there's debate about, so I, as a community member,
Yeah,
as a member of this community,
Yeah.
40 miles an hour on that particular road where you have Pollard, you have DeFazio, and you have the sidewalk issues and all of that, I think personally is too high. Coming to consensus as a committee, different issue,
Oh, yeah,
and town
sorry.
regulation and all of that, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, good.
But
I don't know what the
individual
terminology is.
opinions, I absolutely think it's too high. I don't think anywhere in Needham on any of our streets should we be traveling personally,
Right.
that we should be traveling 40 miles an hour.
I think
So, right, so with the speed study that was done, years ago, I think that's part of the problem, is that there are also towns that have dropped their townwide speeds to 25 miles an hour, I think, which is Lieutenant McGrath's point. They've dropped their
Yeah.
speeds to 25 miles an hour and people don't follow them. So that's
Sure.
a different issue.
So
Yeah, I'm trying to break my brain from.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to break my brain from
1000%,
the
yeah.
technicality of it as opposed to what you're asking.
okay, great.
So I don't, like, I had spoken to you earlier, and you and I have connected in the last couple of years. As a resident, yes, I think given its proximity to DeFazio, its proximity to Pollard, one sidewalk, all of the issues that you're mentioning, yes, I think 40 is probably a little excessive, especially if you wanted to talk about crossing, because there's no way to get unless you do a hawk, there is no other control that you can do without
which
a hawk
is what
crossing,
everyone does.
which is $200,000 to put in to be able to cross a 40-mile-an-hour zone. If you were to drop that, mid-block makes it a little bit more feasible with other controls. But yes, it is excessive. And
Yeah.
I'm speaking that as a member of the community, because I can't necessarily.
And it's also for the neighborhood, right? We cross that street across from my driveway near daily, because when we get home and the neighbors are outside gardening and, getting out of their car, we're crisscrossing to say hello, to say good evening. It's actually because of the truck travel and because of the speeds and the noise pollution, you can't actually talk to your neighbor like across the street. So you have to cross to be able to have a conversation. So it's a compounding, impact. And actually, when the school superintendent sent out an email saying there's going to be extra traffic because we're going to allow people to go in that entrance to Pollard on Dedham, a lot of us said, great, thank you, because with more cars, people are actually going slower, which made it easier to kind of navigate the street. But our school van driver, I won't use the word he used, but he has to pick up my son every morning and is not happy with even having to pull over and then pull back out in the morning to pick up my son to go to school. And it's the non-rush hour, which I mentioned in the form, where you have these tractor trailers going at very high speeds at 5 in the morning and then using engine braking in front of our house before the Webster light. If anyone knows that noise, it is pretty disturbing and very loud.
So I think we may have, all of us that may have individual opinions, may agree or disagree, but as obviously it's collectively we have not voted, et cetera. So let's stipulate and say that 40 miles an hour is probably a little excessive. What's the next part of the how?
So the how is twofold. One is identifying what is the target speed, right? If it's not 40, is it 30? Is it 25? Is it 20? Is it 15? The town has already put advisory signs for 25 along most of that stretch. So at some point, the town already decided, actually, we'd like you to be going 25 miles per hour. So that's one, is saying, okay, target speed, we want people to go 25 miles per hour. At that point, then there's, it's really roadway treatments to create a street that's self-enforcing of those lower speeds. So it's less education from a communication and much more of a physical, you will drive based on how comfortable you are on the context of the roadway. So anything related to roadway treatments around narrowing the lanes, chicanes, which you go a little shuffle a little left, shuffle a little right, kind of vertical as well as horizontal kind of physical changes. The state does have a new resource of design features that support safe speeds. It's a lot of like technical jargon, like vertical deflection countermeasures, but it breaks it down with like speed humps, raised pedestrian crossings, raised intersections, horizontal countermeasures like median islands, chicanes, curbs, curb extensions. There's a lot of communities where you do get off the highway and immediately the lanes kind of split. There's like an island in the middle. It says, welcome to this town, you know, traffic calming zone. It's not a mile or two off the highway. It's the second you get off the highway to say like, welcome, you're in our town, you're in our neighborhood. This is where people like live, work and play, and those roadway treatments kind of help people to navigate like, okay, slow down. This is a different context. You're not still on the highway. And you know, my house is not the entry ramp to 128. That's like over a mile down the road. So chicanes, curbs, curb extensions, median islands, lateral shifts, again, a lot of technical jargon, but there's a one-stop shop for these like roadway treatments that are available and then resources that go along with them. I printed out, I'll pass it around, I only have a black and white printer today, so it's like, see if you can tell, but on the,
These are all the same.
those two are the same. So what you're looking at when you pass those around is kind of either is like the lateral shift or the chicane or the kind of separation. The top one is a permanent and the bottom one is a temporary. Temporary can be used to like pilot, put out cones and other things tomorrow and just see, does it make an impact before actually spending any capital dollars? But the one on the bottom doesn't require full reconstruction. It would just require treatment at certain places. The next one I'm going to show is that's an example of like a horizontal treatment where it's having you go left and right versus up and down. The second picture I'm passing around is the up and down, which is an example of a speed hump, which is very controversial when you say speed bump, but there's a lot of really amazing creative solutions, including the one on the bottom that shows you put brakes in the speed hump to fit the wheelbase of emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, and police vehicles, because it's a really heavily trafficked road for emergency personnel. And we don't want to inhibit that in the slightest. And so there's really creative solutions that are popping up all over the state and the country that have emergency personnel like first and foremost in mind, to be able to just straight shot, go down Denham Ave at 100 miles per hour if you need to, but on a day-to-day basis, cars would be going slower.
I have so many questions and so many.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
thinking. Wait, but do we have an idea of what you mentioned that last DOT is thinking about upgrading or
Rehabilitating the roadway, the surface.
surface?
Yeah, so mill and pave,
Repaving, no,
and then stripers.
and that's the limitation.
It is, and the town is considering doing some other work in conjunction with that. Especially if the bridge is pinched the lanes down to 10 feet. They're currently 12, the lane widths each way. That's part of traffic calming. They'd be adding curbing to the bridge that gives an image of a pinch point. So it's a psychological traffic calming measure. But that would be working alongside MassDOT this summer. If we should
This summer.
So they'll be doing it this summer. So through the winter, we'll have more conversations. So those are ongoing, including what the town would recommend from the Department of Public Works is to restripe it, go from 12-foot lanes to 10 feet. That's the minimum allowed by the Fed for a principal arterial. And look at the design feature under the bridge and get a proper sidewalk, which would allow wheelchairs. Right now it's only 32 inches wide, which is totally inappropriate, and then shift it over. So I'm in favor of those kind of things and measures, but I would be very cautious on a principal arterial to do some of these things that are in a 25-mile zone for a principal arterial. Also, you don't want crashes with cars. There's pedestrian, which is very sensitive. That's a tragedy. Also vehicles. So to shift, I think we're all as a group, all being educated into traffic calming, road sharing, complete street aspects, and how we proceed. I just would be more cautious and rely on civil engineering and sound practices to make some of those recommendations. Even forward leaning, which is fine, because some of these are forward leaning, but not overstep that. That's a sensitive bound because this principal arterial, but try to do what we can to reduce traffic more peacefully. Part of the aspect, some people do not follow the speed zones.
So I would like to
Well, I mean, that you're talking, well, the petition is talking about really physical elements in the roadway, which is what they call capital improvement, capital changes, which is a lot of money probably. But I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is, I don't know that much about it, but if we have 12-foot lanes with shoulders, I mean, it certainly constricts itself by just by the 12-foot lanes. If you have, I don't know what the roadway is at the moment.
It's 26. It varies by about 26 coming into the area we're talking about. At the bridge between the concrete abutments is 30 feet. We have to stay several feet off of that as well.
The pavement under the bridge is narrower than the pavement outside.
It pinches down to 25 feet.
So you have 12.5 foot lanes there. But,
Yes.
oh yeah, and you want to.
Well, you get the marking, so it's a 12-foot.
But if you
So
just.
you want to
create-
go to 10 feet? Is that what
but
you're
if you
saying?
just create
For the
one-
whole stretch or just at the bridge?
That I think is a collaborative thing. That's why we
Yeah.
have this meeting. I don't want to unilaterally make the decision.
Totally, yeah, I
But
understand that.
I'm all in favor of
Yeah.
10-foot and closing lanes. I don't, that's not obstructive, it's just paint. If somebody goes off to go over a marking, most people tend to follow the parallel lines for the markings.
But you also have you also have the visual element of having a 12-foot lane, or even if you cheat a little with 11-foot lanes. And you still create this narrow aspect and probably slows it down somewhat.
It should. That studies say that it does. Now, the federal government guidelines for urban areas, which we are, on 128, those are 12-foot lanes.
Mhm.
Some of the lanes we have in town are 14 feet, which is ridiculous, right? It is. So as we resurface, the goal is to pull those in. And when we can add a bike lane, mark it properly. I'd rather go with 6-inch than our 4-inch, really highlight these things. So all these things are in the works going forward.
Thank you.
I want to respect that it was communicated, there is some civil engineering happening. We can't talk about the speed regulation without that, because we all know and agree that like just changing a sign is not what's going to change behavior. I think in the past it was communicated to me that we can't change the physical roadway because it is a speed limit of 40 miles per hour. And what we have the opportunity today to say is saying, we don't want it to be 40. So let's make changes that force people to drive slower. And you can also, go through the process of rescinding the special speed regulation to the default 30 or a new speed limit.
Well, I think so. After several years of being on this committee and hearing these conversations, there's a universal speed problem in the town, not just on Dedham Ave, not just in front of your house. And where it is absolutely a problem. To me, yes, figuring out what's necessary, town, state level, to be able to at least post a new sign with a lower speed limit. I don't think 25 miles an hour is reasonable at this juncture, given that the road hasn't changed yet or either. Given that most of the roads are 30 to 35 in that place, unless it qualifies for a school zone because they've opened up a collared entrance, which might beg a separate part of the discussion, actually. But there are the need for capital improvements on the roads in this town across the board in much smaller neighborhoods. I mean, you're not in a neighborhood, you're on a busy street, which is, well, it is, but it's not.
Tell my neighbors that it's not a neighborhood.
I live on a busy street too. So I'm a member of this community, have been for 22 years. I live on Mark Tree Road.
I used to live on Mark Tree Road too.
Super busy. I get it, but it's hard because when you, as a town, we have a lot of busy streets. And so looking at the necessity to change those streets across the board, something we've been talking about since I've lived in the town for 22 years.
And I have too. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
And I've been active as a public resident on the transportation working group of revisiting and talking about speed management townwide. And I'm not saying that my specific section is more or less important than any other section across the town. But in terms of the formality of how this group works and what the town responds to requests, this is the forum by which you say, I live at 242. And then I hope that these ideas spark other ideas for other places around town, because I've also been before this committee and listening to other petitioners who've been told, you know, traffic calming and include, you know, is like granite curbing, which is like, we've come to learn in the past 5 years. Then, you know, and you just gave a couple other examples. There's a lot of other solutions that can be done on many other streets. And what I think is really cool is like the temporary or more pilot solutions that you don't have to now start a $20 million capital reconstruction project. Some of these treatments are tens of thousands of dollars or $100,000, and you put in treatments, and that's really cool.
Yeah. So the question I have is at the town level though, and these are things we've talked about in the past. So where we have so many of these needs, and we've talked about it both in terms of automotive, you know, car traffic and specific needs around pedestrian safety. And so we are putting measures in place that are temporary, cost-effective solutions, to your point, in certain places around town that address the pedestrian needs. But there are so many needs across the town. So I think the question is, are there shorter term things that can be done as even as simple as, I do think telling people they're allowed to travel 40 miles an hour says, yeah, but I can really go 48, versus telling them that they can go 30 or 35 means they can push it up to 35, but not up to 48. So how can we, what is that path? I guess that's my question.
I was intrigued by if the state has changed some of the
speed
regs.
zoning regulations. I would like to see it. Well,
Yeah, if that way we can work in a collaborative way.
Yep.
I wouldn't recommend for us to unilaterally try to change it without having a correct path to make sure that we're doing everything in a responsible manner and legal as well, in case speed humps around school zones. I've seen them. I travel all over the place to look at that in place, and was an active member of the RTAC of Boston at the MPO, and a lot of good speakers, a lot of good presentations. I go visit the sites. Some of the forward-thinking traffic calming measures are really intriguing, but they have to be in the right place. Being a principal arterial, I'm a little more hesitant and cautious because it's a numbered speed route. But as far as traffic markings and these other psychological effects that we can do without causing chaos with drivers as well, to get them to slow, we can implement those kind of things just as a regular program with MassDOT this summer when they resurface the road. So we can talk as a group how that would look, and go through, report back, inform you, get your expertise on it from your perspective, and come up with some solutions.
And I know that we've talked and willing to work with the town to kind of help to bring your expertise in working at DOT. I do there is DOT kind of gives an outline about speed zoning changes and how to request speed zoning changes and what is required of each municipalities. Certainly there's a process, so it's not quick, but it's a process.
The legislature also just passed another new law that changes some of this as of just the new year. So even in the next couple of weeks, there'll be even further guidance and simplification of requesting changes.
It's good to hear. And they just did a little dump of the mass amendments to the traffic control devices, school zones too as well. The one thing that sparked my ears went up was you mentioned about how long ago has that back entrance for Pollard been used as an entrance for the school? Like, is this a reason?
No, it was before COVID.
All right, I don't have a kid. So, but if that's true, that's an entrance and an exit on from a school. So that potentially could be a school zone or should be a school zone.
It's utilized only as an entrance at this point. You probably know better.
I don't know the update truthfully. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the superintendent
I
sent
don't-
something out to a few years ago, and it might have been a couple years ago, and
It was to alleviate the pressure on the backside of like Glen, Bradford, Glen, yeah. So that it was to make the traffic go in and then come out that neighborhood in a more fluid circle.
Mhm.
I don't think they come back out.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
correct.
and I know it's gated, like sometimes the gate's down,
Yeah,
sometimes it's
Or it's
not,
broken or
so,
it's
yeah.
gonna push through.
and it is how the neighborhood uses it though, as an entrance and exit, just for everyday.
That's something to evaluate, some of which I think some of the solution for this issue is really agenda item number 8, which is really the town is going through and I know you were kind of part of those discussions. Kind of reevaluating how we holistically manage transportation in town and traffic. And looking at, a town-wide speed management plan, which this is something that I think we're classified as that. But knowing that there are changes that are going to take place in terms of the markings that are, for the summer, is the committee entertaining anything that the committee wants to have a conversation with? What short term can we do?
This construction season, when they resurface, we will look at that bridge and put sidewalk that's currently 33 inches, which is inappropriate for somebody in a chair pushing a carriage.
Yep.
Or sidewalk. Snow clearing equipment can't fit on it. It's ridiculous. So we could look at, as we go through the project, restriping, maybe shifting a little bit to the road, away from the school side, which would be westward a foot or so, and creating either markings and new curbing with new sidewalk. That way the sidewalk at the very least is helpful. That I see is a very important factor to get to and from the recreational fields as well for people and get up to the Pollard rear entrance. For the traffic flow, 10-foot lanes, maybe a little bit of shift. We can't go too far. It's really tight. It's only just under 30 feet, bridge abutment to bridge abutment. And that would give us just enough room. We want to verify, probably with one of our engineering consultants, that we're doing it appropriate engineering standards and we're meeting our goals, traffic calming, sidewalk, but are within the engineering and legal rights to do it. It's very tight. So that's our goal.
We mentioned in another meeting as well, that intersection, Dedham Abbott South, is on I can't remember what capital plan it's on now, 5. But isn't that looking at a complete redesign as well that might?
Yeah, the design is probably in, I'm not sure what year, it's probably in 5, and then there's a year or 2 delay as it's being designed and vetted with the public. These all have to go through public hearings and it's a process. So it might be 7 years out.
Sure.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Can we look at when you in the next month or 2? Can we look at the possibilities? I think this will also help us solve other issues. What is involved in a speed zone change with the state? What is the criteria for changing, for altering? If we were to move and suddenly go back to what is known as the default thickly settled 30, if we were to move the 40 and we just kind of revert back to the de facto, can we just look into what is involved in that? Because I think that there's always been a mental block to say that, and we've always postured everything we do because we've always said that we can't change the speed limit because we were always told we can't change the speed limit.
You can.
No, I get that, but I'm like, can we look and see what is in our toolbox? That what evidence do we need? What studies do we need? What speed observations or recent crash histories that we
Or
need
can we
to
just
pull
take
up?
on the sign?
There's one side.
I didn't want to say that on camera.
That might be the cheapest.
I'm happy to be the one to say that, you know that.
But
I'm not going to.
if we could do that, and that would dovetail into our kind of longer term strategic plans for the town.
Absolutely.
But at least that will give that, you know, we're doing something. We know that the lanes are going to be reduced come past the next season, but if we can do something in the meantime, you know, and look at a possibility of reduction of speed to at least go back to either 35 where it is on Chestnut, you know, at least, you know, one thing versus or just 30 for that, because I think that once you have somebody 35, they're going to go 40, 42.
25 or 30, 20 or 25.
But no,
as target speed, knowing.
And I don't know where that, do we know where that 25 came from when we did that? The advisory.
Oh,
advisory
I don't
limit.
know.
That's been there, I know,
For a long,
decades.
long time, yeah.
But it'd be very cool to find out then, like, if with the changes in the project this year, how that impacts speed too. If it actually forces drivers to go down, all the speed zoning is like 10 times easier. If cars are actually going 10 miles per hour, you post it for 10 miles per hour, like.
Yep. Well, can I ask you then to, and I can connect you guys up to, because I know you said there's a couple changes coming up, you know, that, but just as they come up, if you could also help us to help you, you know what I mean, and kind of.
Absolutely.
Love that.
And I'd love to help that with, town, like in
Okay.
other locations as well.
Perfect. Okay.
I have one other question, which is that so as we look at it, say, okay, whatever the speed limit needs to be, and we know there needs to be traffic calming, so we can look at these measures. When we've talked about using temporary, very inexpensive methods like paint to direct traffic, are there things, given how many things end up being 5 to 7 years out or 7 to 10 years that ultimately become 10 to 12, do we have opportunities to use things like paint and other, you know, cones and some of the other things we've talked about to pilot?
Absolutely.
Some of
And
these
when we
things.
call it a pilot, it gives us a lot of room.
Right.
We're doing a lot more of that, and we should. And so that will continue.
We've done those orange barriers in town as a
I
pilot.
just saw, I think,
So that's a way to kind of see if reduction of that is you know, long-term is something that's would help. So there are a couple pilots that are going on. So anything else on this issue from the committee? Is there anything you wanted to add, Jackie?
it's just more of what the next step is.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna.
Could I just ask, if I could, Mr. Chair? I just want to make sure, because you mentioned the committee in the past, you didn't get a response. I'm not sure what those documents were, but this committee definitely wants to respond back to let you know either we agree to move forward on certain issues and to look and pilot. And because you're a member of MassDOT, if you have newer information, you can give it to us to help us meet those goals, and they're feasible, they're legal, meet the engineering standards, then we will implement that as a group if it makes sense. So that will be helpful to give us if
Great.
you have newer information. In the last few years, I used to have a lot coming from MassDOT. It's really under COVID pretty much slowed down on the educational side, but I know that MassDOT's moved forward with great initiatives. So we may be behind because you guys are bringing it forward to the communities. So if we're not aware and we can use that information as a committee to make more informed current decisions, I'm sure we're all forward on that.
Yeah.
And so then we can get back to, I don't know how we vote tonight because it's so vague.
I mean, I think
We're
that,
still looking at information gathering.
yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, the request, I don't know if we need to vote. Well, sure, we could do a motion to vote that, that DPW looks into the evaluates on how to, the process on reduction of the speed zone. That's what it is. Yeah, so there is a motion to see if the DPW could look into the process with DOT for how to obtain a speed zone reduction. Second by Mr. Graff. Any discussion on that?
Do we want to include anything else in this? Just be talking about, let's say, given the upcoming construction. Is there anything in there we can do there, or we just, is that inherent to that?
Well, I think that's kind of independent because they're going to be reducing the lanes regardless, and that's going to happen because that's in the bid, right?
It's not in the bid. It's what the town has considered, reviewed, and decided we have all rights to do so. Okay. So once it's new surface, That's the goal, and how we line that up, we have to look at.
So let's keep that, we'll keep the motion on the table that, and it's been seconded for having a town evaluate how to change the speed zone, how to reduce the speed zone. Seconded by Mr. McGrath. No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any abstention or anyone against it? Any abstentions? I know that's the worst way to say it. Anyone against it? No, then the motion passes. The town will look into how they need to, the speed zone regulation with MassDOT, you know, for what the process is. I think they need to obtain, you know, studies, et cetera, crash data, and looking at what we can do to reduce the speed zone. And then we have the construction projects right now. I think this will still be on the horizon for the other committees that are going to be formed, that are going to be looking at strategic holistic planning across the.
So now we voted on it this time, but I do have a question. So that if we decide that, to you sort of raised this earlier, that we can reduce the speed there based on the other speeds of the other main roads entering Needham, in principle, you would want the same thing.
Well, that's what we're looking at. I mean, that's honestly, it's the only 40-mile-an-hour speed bump that's entering Needham. Greendale, that doesn't enter Needham, it's within Needham. You know what I mean? It's 40 by Moderna.
Right.
Complex is. I think
would
that's
we
the
want
only
any
one.
40? Would you like? But that's the.
I mean, that's a little excessive there, but I don't even. I mean, I haven't got a tape measure. It's supposed to be 200 feet is thickly settled, so above 200 feet between each structure is why they probably pushed it up.
Chapter 90 is a little lacking these days. Yeah. I would have to look. It's 1/8 of a mile or.
Yeah, I know. And there's supposed to formula. I mean, yeah, but that's
Most
one
of
of the
these
things.
speed
Do we want to be a
regulations were
community?
set decades ago.
Yeah, right.
They're literally on an index card with a pencil from the early 1970s. So in terms of like why they were set at what they were,
So-
there's a lot of, but I appreciate your comment about, should we allow it anywhere,
Does
right?
anyone
Like
need to
every
drive 40
entrance,
miles
every
an hour?
entrance to Needham
Right.
could say, hey, you're in our town, you're in our neighborhood, this is where people
So
live
100%
and play.
that
Yeah.
as part of, you know, strategically, I personally do not believe that 40 miles an hour is the appropriate speed limit anywhere in town. But, and that's the thing, we as a town, what does that look like in terms of speed management, and then and apply that holistically across the town? Like we, you know, evaluate. That's really what the goal of agenda and what the meetings. But yes, that would be important discussion. That's a good point. So if there's nothing else, want to kind of, is that
Thank
acceptable? And I can connect to you guys as well after this meeting, and hopefully we can do something from that.
Thank you. I
All right.
appreciate it. I'm feeling happy leaving after this discussion. So
Thank
thank you.
Email and
Yes.
email and your phone number if you want to put that, and then I'll make sure to give it to Brady tomorrow.
So, agenda item number. Crosswalks across Webster Street, Mark Lee, and Park Ave. Mr. Sommer. Is that a correct pronunciation?
Soper.
Sober, okay.
I heard that.
And you could either do podium or a seat. I want to make sure that.
Okay, cool.
You do either one.
This
have your items
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drag it over.
Oh,
I have to open it.
No.
That's another.
All right.
All right.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So my name is Wes Soper. I live at 32 Mark Lee Road, not Mark Tree, Mark Lee Road in Needham Heights. And thank you to the Traffic Management Advisory Committee for the opportunity to speak here. And also a special thank you to Tyler, who has been a huge help to me and a good resource on information leading up to this. So I just wanted to recognize Tyler. So So I'm here today as an individual. I'm a father of 5 very young and very active children, but I also represent a collective group of people in my neighborhood. Just to sort of illustrate what that group or how strong that group is, I started a petition yesterday. It's not the Needham official petition process, but just to sort of get a take of people's temperature, and I've done 54 signatures on that so far, and I just started that yesterday. So the area of our concern is the stretch of Webster Ave that runs between Highland Ave and High West Street. So I've highlighted it here, but I'm sure you're all very familiar with this. The concern is about the speed of traffic that drive through this area. It's marked as a 30-mile-an-hour zone, but that's in practice not what we have come to expect. So what we're asking for is that the committee and I apologize, I'm not super knowledgeable about what the steps are and how the process really works, but what we would ultimately like to see is measurements go into place to reduce the speed of traffic on this stretch. And specifically, we would like to see a crosswalk installed between Park Street and Mark Lee Road, which is this dot right here, crossing over Webster. So just a little bit of background. Like many parts of Needham, this is a neighborhood that is very residential and densely populated by families, many of whom have young children like myself. This intersection, which I'm going to show you a picture of here. This intersection receives a particularly high amount of foot traffic, as it's a direct route from people who are living over towards Park and Spring to get to the train station in Needham Heights, and as well as the surrounding restaurant shops in that area. I also live directly on this route, so I can personally attest to the daily activity I see of people flowing down Markley, going into the center. This intersection, it's also in close proximity to Avery Field, which in the warmer months is used for a lot of youth sports, which adds to the busyness of the area. Our house is about 400 feet from this intersection, and I pass through it on a daily basis, either taking my son to school, walking our dog, picking my son up from Temple. So I'm very familiar with it. As I mentioned, the posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour, but I've witnessed innumerable times cars driving well in excess of that limit. I understand that speeds across Needham are a concern, put us among the concern list. Now, of course, a large portion of driving safety is the responsibility of the drivers, but I want to point out that this stretch, this is a half-mile stretch or a 0.4 mile stretch between Webster, on Webster between Highland and West. And if you're driving south on Webster, away from Highland Ave, there's one yellow sign that's to signify residential area, 30 miles an hour. It's at approximately 290 Webster Street, which is right around here. I have a picture of it, but it's not here. And then if you're coming from the opposite direction, there are actually 0 signs to indicate it's a residential area or what the speed limit is. My final point is I want to mention that this is traveling on Webster north, so away from West Street. And as you can see, the road bends around the corner up here. And that creates a lot of visibility issues. I've had the experience countless times of looking both ways, it looking clear, crossing, particularly from Park and crossing over to Markley, and then being midway across the street and there's a car. Never anything that's been too close, but a lot of, it gives you a lot of what if thoughts, and what if this car was driving a little faster? Would they have been able to stop in time, etc. I was going to mention the incident that occurred in 2018, which was about a half a mile away from this intersection here. But I think everyone understands the point I'm trying to make here, and the urgency we as a neighborhood feel to address it. So just to summarize, this is just another angle of what it's like to get onto or cross over Webster Street. This is Park here, and across the street is Markley. So if you can imagine, you're up here looking to cross, and that there isn't a lot of visibility to cars coming. My main points here are: this is an intersection that receives a lot of foot traffic due to the areas I laid out. Cars on this stretch, there's very minimal deterrence to drive at the speed limit, and as a result, people are, it's a very busy place that people drive above the limit, and then the issues with the visibility combined to make this a very dangerous place for area residents. I know there's ways to deter this, and I'm open to discussion about it. That kind of concludes the remarks I had planned. I also have statements from 3 members of the community, fellow fathers, who share the concern and support for the initiative. I wasn't planning to read them tonight, but I can pull them up and share them with you all as well. But that's all I have prepared.
Thank you. And you can certainly provide those to Daphne for the record.
Okay.
Two things come to mind. One, obviously, have we ever, first of all, I'm going to ask, have we ever done any speed study on this area?
Not recently.
Not recently, okay. Obviously, we, before we like to, make motions for mitigations, et cetera, we need to actually have the data to suggest, because everyone says that everyone speeds, and to some extent they're partially right. To some extent, it's hard to actually tell how fast someone's going unless we have quantitative data.
Yep.
To do this. So my first thing, number one, I would say that we would do a speed study of the area. Okay. Number 2 was where the crosswalk issue. I just looked at what you were talking about, how dangerous that road is right there with the curve, is probably one of the reasons why there's no crosswalk there. And I don't know why, because you can't put a crosswalk on an area that's not safe. And if we're, a crosswalk isn't like if you build it, they will come kind of thing. It's more of, we need to make sure that the crosswalk is in an area that is safe to cross. And the town is basically saying, if you go between these lines, it's safe to do so. And if there's a blind curve, and I'm only going on the map here, we have to actually study it and see if it, in fact, that the geometry of that road is going to necessarily not make it fruitful to put, or safe to put a crosswalk there. Perhaps on the other side of the street might be a little bit better to get a little more distance. But obviously, we have a criteria for how we assess crosswalks. We were given it by consultants who actually came in and studied all of our existing crosswalks after the 2018 tragedy. So they did, one of the outputs of that was a crosswalk evaluation criteria. So we could take the data that we would do, throw that through the criteria, and see if it's something that would be warranted for one. That's just my 2 things that I'd say. I open up for the committee to have their own thoughts, challenges, thoughts, etc.
I think the chair articulated it well. least I see the need because of the foot traffic. I'm well aware it crosses there, that we could look as a group to try to get something that we think would be safe. If we just don't want to put a crosswalk in an RFP if speeds are too high, and it wouldn't be safe. When we put the crosswalks in, we're as a body, we're saying that it's safe. And so we have to do all measures to make sure that it's appropriate. I see the need for it there. It makes total sense from your presentation. And then, as you say on the last point, that it's dangerous for pedestrians, that strikes fear into us because that's how we help judge it. And so we have to look at not just putting a simple crosswalk in. We wouldn't do it because we're well aware of it. So we need the data and then see how to move it. It might be, this one doesn't seem to me from superintendent of highway to just do markings. It's something greater than that. And that takes data and a little bit of capital, but I would personally be in favor of trying to move it forward if it's possible.
Yeah.
Because there's a big need on pedestrians, and that should be our focus also as a group, not just vehicles. Maybe slow it down to some other kind of measures.
There's sidewalks on both sides of Webster there, right? There's sidewalks on both sides, so it's not an issue for. Okay.
Is there a crosswalk within a block either direction or no crosswalk?
I think it's West Street and then Highland are the two. So there's really, I mean, it would be appropriate.
There are no crosswalks.
They're
There
not within 300 feet.
It would be appropriate to.
So that even if there weren't one at Park and Marks Lee, that wherever there is, wherever it's safe, because the other thing that's the safety measure is speed, but there's also visibility. So the problem at that intersection is visuals that you should work, that you can't, that a car couldn't properly see someone if they were in a crosswalk. So that if a block over, it were safer because they have more visibility. That it might be a more appropriate.
Yeah, maybe even across Webster by Atherton, but there's a little bit of a jog.
Even
Yeah.
moving it to your shot on the foreground, just to make sure the sight distances. We have to meet certain criteria. So
Just wonder.
get another shot.
That's right.
We can also pull it up.
So on the foreground, which is now it's in the background, would that work with that FedEx truck like further down so we're away from the curve?
Yep.
Would the foot traffic follow it? Like
I would. This is the main drag. I would say.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
There's another cross that, down here. This is Spring and Alfreton, and then a block after that is High and West, where there is obviously a crosswalk. There's a light, but
so on the foreground is where most, I think, people are flocking on my observation for some reason.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, on this side of like not the side that the FedEx is on, I would like to see it being closer to us in the foreground.
Correct. Yeah. So we also look at the curve. So that's something we have to do. The data engineering will look at it to see if they can come back to this committee saying it meets the engineering criteria that's in place, and then we could.
So perfect. What I want to recognize, Lieutenant McGrath is one of the reasons. You probably don't see raise your hand. You're so glad to do that.
Today, I don't want to enter ratings on a roll. I know we have the complete streets and the crosswalk guidelines going on with this, and I know we're discussing it later on the future transportation committee. My question is, I understand what the petitioner is saying in this particular area. However, we had a petitioner a few months ago that was talking about Webster down by Longfellow. It's similar issues, wanting to utilize the library, those particular areas. You move over to Great Plain Avenue between the ladder streets, Stevens Road, Plymouth, all those. This is more probably for the committee than it is for you as a petitioner, but I think I just wanted to be said because we can't just start placing crosswalks every X amount of feet. It would kind of make people numb to crosswalks. So I think that very well may fit this section. However, the argument I could see is that you could walk up to High Street to get to the shopping district. You could walk down to Highland Ave to utilize the temple. I don't like to be the negative voice of the group at the moment. I think we need to look at what we've been saying is formalizing the committee's policy to how we're going to look at this. Because there's other good arguments that could be made as to why other people feel their side street should have a crosswalk to get across Webster Street.
Sure, that's a very good point, John, and we've had everyone's signs and markings in its in front of their house or whatever it is if they're concerned. I think in this case this may be, I think, appropriate just in my gut, but yes, I do know that we looked at other situations where it's not feasible because they're so close to other crosswalks, et cetera. But either way, I think let's look at the data. Let's you know what I mean. Let's see that, and then we can make an appropriate decision if this is right or not. So I think I want to make a motion to do a speed count type study. And yes,
Yeah,
and then also looking at the
site distance.
Yes, the criteria for a possible installation of crosswalk using the GPI criteria, and which it looks at site distance and curvature, et cetera, just from the feasibility. So the two different things: one the study and one looking. So two separate things we could do. We could act on one or the other, or both, or not. But certainly, let's do that. That's the motion on the table. Seconded. And do we have any discussion on that? Hearing none, I call the vote on the motion, which is to the study as well as an evaluation of crosswalk. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. So
Thank you all.
that's the beginning of the process. So once we collect that data, it might be, and I don't know what your backup is, but it might be next month, it'll be the month after, et cetera, that they'll come back and say, yes, no, here, maybe so, and then we'll discuss as a committee, and then someone will get back to you, let you know.
Great. Just to let the petitioner know, I don't know if there is a Webster Street gas project that is potentially occurring this winter. I don't know if that's still held up or not.
I think it's not in this particular section.
Okay, all right. I just didn't want it to affect
From west back towards the high school.
Gotcha.
Parkinson.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
And then let's not
digging it up.
Yeah.
Let's not do it on like school vacation. Just
Oh, right, yeah,
whatever.
that kind of
So
stuff, yeah.
yeah, but that can confound a lot.
Will I be notified when the study is taking place? Yeah.
Probably not. You might
Yeah.
you'll probably
You'll
see
see.
it.
You'll see
see
it.
there's
You'll
two
see it.
tubes
That's
that
what
go
that's.
across,
You'll know. There'll be
Okay.
two tubes in the road.
Great.
That's generally when it's.
I'll tell everybody to drive.
Yeah,
through the
all right. I won't put the tubes out. We're not gonna do that.
I will not. Okay, great. Thank you all.
So we perfect. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Intersection at Woodland, Hillcrest, and Marlboro. Noah Ornstein.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Click it and slide.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Noah Ornstein. I live at 115 Wood Ledge, and I bring up the concern, not necessarily because it's a direct concern to me, but because I literally look out at this intersection at the main windows of my house. Quick thanks to Tyler for helping to figure this out. This is my first foray into local politics, and thanks to you guys for all your dedication to the town and keeping us safe. I just narrated a quick video from outside. Makes it kind of the easiest way so that you can see all shots and angles, and happy to discuss thereafter. Theoretically.
So it should open and just
Thank you for hearing the concern. This is regarding the intersection of Woodledge, Hillcrest, and Edwardell. This intersection is the first intersection off of Brookline on Woodledge. The concern is the amount of traffic and the speed of that traffic, both coming up this hill here and coming down this hill here. This is a main intersection thoroughfare for all pedestrian traffic and kids going to the Mitchell School, which they usually go down this direction and take Brookline up. And because it is a main thoroughfare road headed into all the neighborhoods off of Brookline, there is a lot of construction vehicle traffic, Amazon package delivery traffic that goes up into these roads, and these trucks do come flying up and down these roads, especially trying to gain momentum up the hill, and also more particularly the trucks that are coming downhill. So again, two-way intersection, the stop signs are on this side, looking to propose additional stop signs, in this intersection. Thanks for hearing the concern. So I think primarily, it's very residential neighborhood, as there are many in the area, and it's really that off of Brookline, when you take a left, right, the hill is pretty graded, and so it's not so much the momentum of the cars coming up the hill, and so it's more what the traffic looks like as it's coming down Woodledge as it's coasting down the hill. I don't know what's involved in transitioning an intersection from a two-way intersection to a two-way stop to a three-way stop, or, and I don't know the feasibility of, how momentum studies happen of going up a hill and how you may not want to have a stop sign going up the hill. But it does pose, there are plenty of cars that come, speeding down Hillcrest and take a hard left, whether they're coming to a full stop or not at that intersection, and then utilize that momentum going down the hill to Brookline. I don't know that it's a traffic accident area of concern, but certainly it's also, the graded hill presents a little bit of icier conditions in the wintertime. Again, that's really the concern. That's the statistic there. And like I said, it's not so much that, it affects me directly, right? Although the driveway to our house is right at that downgrade of the hill, but it's just that it's the main thoroughfare for most kids in these neighborhoods. If they're walking to Mitchell, they're going to walk down that hill right past our house and then take a left up to Brookline. And it was just the concern of, kids on bikes, going back and forth. And I figured I would bring it up as a source of concern, because I've seen a number of, I can't tell you what a close call is, but certainly, kids on bikes, pedestrians, people walking dogs, as far as it being a primary intersection into those neighborhoods.
So first instinct, unless anyone wants to take this, but I can say usually, we're limited, we as a town are limited to this federal manual runs the 2009 edition.
Sure.
It may be updating at some point. That's called the Federal Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Sure.
In which they have criteria, or what they call the warrants, that say, these are the criteria that you need for, X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
For stop signs, that one of the criteria that they say is they have to be almost equal traffic coming from all directions in order to support the warrant for a four-way stop sign.
Sure.
Versus a two-way stop sign. So, because this has come up before in front of the committee for other areas. Of course. And obviously we could, certainly do a study and figure out, but anecdotally, I think most of the traffic is Woodledge, right? Most of the traffic is up and down. Yeah. So that's just my first instinct is that it wouldn't necessarily support the warrant for that. Depending, now there's also other ways to do it. It's crash data. There's other factors that could perhaps meet the warrant, but I would want to see to our technical.
What it says is that if there's more traffic on the thoroughfare, you would be limited to placing stop signs on the more traffic thoroughfare, whereas the less traffic thoroughfare, you'd be able to place more stop signs.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I had to think about that.
Yeah, sure. So it is interesting just because as you go down, as you come off of Brookline onto Woodledge up this hill, right, there are then stop signs on Woodledge, then further, another 2 or 3 blocks down, but not at this intersection specifically. I didn't put that all together. But.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, stop signs, like, it's also a common misconception that stop signs are there to deter speed. And
For
in
sure.
reality, stop signs are there as determining right away.
Sure.
As opposed to speed limit.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, if you
Yeah.
have to stop for someone, then it is slowing.
Of course.
Right.
I think actually, and I don't know the decision between 2-way versus 3-way versus 4-way, and I'm sure there are regulations and restrictions on all of it. But I mean, the primary concern is mostly the traffic that is at the crest of the hill that is using their momentum to then go down that hill, right? As it pertains to then pedestrian traffic and the intersection specifically. It really what it is there's a lot of kids that bike between Edwardale and Hillcrest over Woodledge. And you follow over that intersection. And so it's not even so much as the concern of the speed of the cars as it is that people can sort of like, it's a straightaway, right? And then it goes down the hill. And so there's no deterrent to really stopping any form of vehicle, whether that be trucks, any form of vehicle, right, to pausing before they go down the hill, right? And it's that cross intersection between Edwardale and Hillcrest that gain a lot of that foot traffic, right, back and forth across just for residential, walking of dogs, etc.
So your concern is pedestrian safety crossing Woodledge.
Pedestrian safety across Woodledge, yeah. I mean, I don't believe that like speed of cars up the hill. It sounds like they're going fast because they need a fair amount of momentum to get up it, right? But it's not actually the speed that's a concern as it is like what you're saying, just the pedestrian traffic concern.
Bob or Rain or John or anybody on the committee have any comments or?
I would agree what the chair was saying on the restrictions for us because of to meet the warrants, which is required.
Yeah, excellent.
A lot of these cases, an engineer with stamp has to sign off that puts liability on them, so they must follow some of these warrants.
Sure.
Was this video taken just recently?
Like 2 days ago.
Okay. We put a stop line, a stop line, just to kind of enunciate the fact that there should be stopping there.
Just do you want me to reply?
Would it be helpful to pull up the street view?
Sure.
Sure, yeah. Thanks. I mean, I guess markings on the road, it's a great idea, just as far as any version of demarcation to, I mean, it's a relatively unpainted area of streets. I think it was recently paved a year or 2 ago, sorry.
Is it, and you're saying the kids on the bikes crossing over, is it kind of a, they're not stopping for the stop sign, like, is it there just kind of like doing the loop and kind of having like an education for the kids?
So, I mean, certainly, like, I mean, the relevance of painting lines, the stop sign lines on the street could provide value to pedestrians, as far as, yeah, that's great. Okay, sure. So yeah, it's really using now.
So you can use the scroll wheel to zoom.
It's offset. It is all offset too.
Yeah.
So the concern is that
it's really foot traffic here.
Yeah.
Right. And it's cars coming from here and down here. It's graded down.
Sure.
Right. To Brookline. Right. And so it ends up. It's not, like I said, it's not the cars struggling to get up here. It's this traffic, this direction. It's foot traffic, this direction, and again, kids are walking down here to get down to Brookline.
Can I raise a? I don't know if it's a question, but Hillcrest seems to have this neighborhood seems to have a general issue with one street flowing into another and not really having a demarcation of. Am I looking at the person?
No, I just
okay.
been thinking when I first got on here, like Birds Hill, that whole area is like They still get lost.
I'll find
your
house,
don't worry.
No, yeah, sure. Totally.
We've seen it.
I get lost too.
I know.
Before. So, like, normally you would say, okay, yes, you know, kids need to get off their bikes and walk across the street, or they need to stop at a stop sign like cars, but this neighborhood is really wonky. It has there's no distinction between where one street ends, where the next one begins, where, you know, so you can understand where the traffic would naturally flow into one or the other. So how do we solve that? Because it's this intersection. What's the other intersection that's come up here that's a really bad one? Hillcrest and
Wyoming, Hillcrest, Highgate.
Yeah, Highgate.
Highgate, yeah, sure.
I know.
It's a
Right.
byway.
So,
Or Falcon.
Yeah, exactly.
so, because looking at this, I mean, that looks like it quiet, you know, like the confusion makes sense. So the question is, how do we solve that? How do you solve that somehow to delineate without a stop sign? How do we?
The geometry is just how they built it back in the day, and it wouldn't be built today like that.
But so does that allow, so if you have, and I really don't know the answer, if you have bad geometry, is that an opportunity? Are there exceptions to, for example, the stop sign rule where there's bad geometry?
Not aware.
Find out, because it does seem like, you know, there's got to be something. So, because otherwise you can't put in, I mean, a crosswalk doesn't make sense because that's just as confusing. That's dangerous.
I would say that obviously, you know, an additional stop at the top here is the most helpful. But if we can't fit that into what is federally mandated limitations, then I would say that some sort of like painting of the road, right, just to sort of emphasize what is the stop sign there. I mean, some of the incidents that I've seen that have been the closest of issues are this is also kind of a straightaway, and cars will come here, will do a slow version of a stop, right, and will then bend here. And because it's a little bit blinded in this corner, just based on, again, you're getting a distorted view, right? I mean, it just.
Is there a stop sign?
Yeah.
Wait, so you're saying that people are blowing through the stop sign too?
So, yes,
I mean,
it is, yeah, I mean, you could talk to Lieutenant
That's
McGrath
the first
about that.
motion.
Go ahead, yeah.
If you can scroll to that.
Can we move
I would
is the
move
stop
the
sign in the
stop
wrong
sign
place? Yeah,
back
exactly.
And put a stop line in.
It's not clear that there's a stop sign, so I agree. So I second the motion, moving the stop sign back and putting in the stop sign. That's clear.
Right. So that's one stop
On both
sign.
sides?
And then-
Yeah,
Is it a
'cause that
problem
one's
on the
on
other
hold.
side too?
Yeah, there's one attached.
It's on the, totally,
Right here.
yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, some reinforced, you know, demarcation to where the stop signs are, lines on the street. And I mean, I think, you know, it does, like, thank you guys for thinking outside the box on it, but that's, yeah, those are good alternatives.
Okay, so wait, but there's a motion on the table. So
I was going to get.
Okay, so sorry. I move to have both stop signs placed appropriately where engineering determines that is with the stop line on both sides.
I second the motion.
So we have a motion on the table and seconded. Do we have discussion?
Well, that's where you can participate, right? Jack,
Do you discuss, is there any comment on this motion or?
No.
Okay, so all in favor? Oh, sorry.
Oh, 1 second. Is one of the concerns the turns, that people make fast turns? I'm seeing, for example, that some of the pretty sharp. So they have to make a turn. And I noticed from, let's say, from left to the bottom to the left side, it's a pretty wide turn. Is that a
I think that's
concern?
more the distortions
That's
on
more the distortion.
the
Okay.
video. It's a pretty straightforward, yeah,
Okay.
four-way,
Yeah,
you
because
know.
it looks like four, yeah, that's right. Looks
Yeah.
on four-way.
Right, I think you're getting a little bit more, but I mean, I would say the observation of the position of this stop sign could make the entire difference in how legitimate people see that intersection.
So we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Is there any other discussion with regards to the stop sign motion? Hearing none. We're going to vote on the matter. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the motion passes. We will move those stop signs and replace stop bars. I did want to give an opportunity for someone from Jackie to actually comment on this matter.
Yeah, so in past also where we've had similar concerns, and to Rand's point about kind of the geometry, I think it's always in these cases, right, the initial reaction might be like, okay, is it a four-way stop? If that's not technically allowed, it's like, what are all the other like speed management, you know, and pedestrian crossing solutions? And so that was going to be my question about the radiuses too. Like, when we talk about width and travel lanes, like, is that 30 feet across? And, you know, how much pavement is actually in that intersection where you can
use paint,
do a lot of things temporarily. There's a lot of communities across the country who paint their intersections. That's sponsored by cities and towns. You know, even too as a visual matter. And then what is the radius? And so just beyond just like the stop sign solution, to looking at radius, like curb roundabouts and other things. And there's a lot of temporary things that can be done without any capital reconstruction.
That was sort of going to be my second question. Can we look into both? Are there exceptions to the stop sign rule where you have a situation like this? Is that a thing? Is it just, you know, I think we've always we've known it's not, but there must be exceptions to certain.
Well, even for signage wise, have we ever done, is it legal to do a yield sign into a two-way? So at least you're giving the visual of people coming Woodledge down towards Brookline. Like, it's not a stop sign, but it's like in the presence of a bad intersection.
Maybe there's a
potentially say dangerous intersection or something. There's some. I think we're kind of getting away from.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the right terminology.
But we could do an advisory sign coming down the hill, saying, you know, intersection, and maybe giving a what do you call it? You know, markings of whatever the appropriate intersection is, and say slow. And I even be in favor of writing the word slow on the pavement.
Yeah, I would say, like, you know, I mean, because it's residential and because there's tree overgrowth, like we may not see the signage, you know, like you could put 100 signs out, you know, but it's a matter of people seeing it. So I mean, just knowing the intersection well, like instead of more yield signs or more slow, like instead of just over signing the intersection, I think, thank you for the suggestion about the painted lines, right? Whatever version can go on the street there that just assists people in a, hey, like if you're on your bike, this is still an intersection that you should stop at, right? It's just because you're 12, right? Doesn't mean that you have run of the road, and you know, you need to be careful.
I think by, you know, having some stop bars indicating, you know, that will change. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the right thing to do here is, because I do see we could put in some white.
Right. Well, I think you have to know to Jackie's point about the radius. It's the same situation with the intersection at with what's it called, not Standish, like we're Standish, or we were just doing this at Standish and Countryway.
Yeah.
You know, if it's such a wide space that you need to direct the traffic, do we look at using paint there? So I just think is it worth about just understanding it and looking at it within that context?
So can we have you guys evaluate, or you know, can we evaluate as go back to the committee, and we can look into seeing what other markings can be done?
Because there might just be one area that if you were to clearly direct one area, that it would make a difference.
Right.
Because you just have to be aware, though, there are certain things like once they look at it and say, okay, this makes sense to do this. So right now, oh, we did this on Countryway and Standish, which is on the way back to the dump.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people in the neighborhood that really don't like it.
Yeah,
So,
you mean markings, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's why I think, I mean, I think I like just the moving the stop sign and putting the stop lines there may solve the whole solution, right? So not to take unnecessarily town tax, tax dollars, or, not to do like huge amount of surveys or spend unwanted time. I'd say a safer position of the two-way stops with the lines, call it a day. And I mean, I look at it the thing, every evening. So if there continues to be concerns that come up,
but I do think we should evaluate I would like to understand as a town,
Yes.
if there are exceptions to the stop sign. rule.
Because there are other
Because,
areas. that
Yes,
have-
there are other areas where this has come up, and I think it's a good time to just evaluate where.
I mean,
that is
obviously,
possible.
ideal from my isolated, concern is the addition of one additional stop sign. But like, we may be fine with painted lines in more appropriate positions. Okay.
So that's what we'll do that, and then we'll evaluate, and maybe, if we see something later on, but I think we have something that we did. And hopefully we'll look what we can do later on.
Those stop signs, because there was already regulations, the process is gonna be quick.
Yeah.
You talk to the sign guy tomorrow, it's getting paint.
You got a good sign guy.
Paint,
Yeah.
pretty good, yeah. So but I'm disappointed there's no mark. These need to have as a townwide, there's a stop sign. We want to see a stop bar. So we'll relocate that to the proper spot.
Should be, before where the sidewalk discharges the street.
Where the sidewalk.
So that needs to be relocated and the bar. I don't want to promise a stop bar. It's winter. We should usually shut down the tank, but it's been so warm. If that continues, then we'll also try.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
I appreciate it. Great. Thank you.
And we have speeds down Hillside Avenue, Mr. Bailey.
All right, thanks everyone. My name's Eric Bailey. I've lived on Hillside Avenue across from Cricket Field for about 25 years. I'm also a town meeting member in Precinct A. And what I want to do is bring your attention to what I think is insufficient signage on Hillside Avenue going downhill past Cricket Field. And I've kind of, in observing the previous presentations, I think there's a bit of a trend here where downhill tends to be higher speeds. And it's not a problem going the other way, it's the downhill side. So before I go into the main pictures, I wanted to say there is a precedent for a speed limit sign. So this is the Honeywell Hillside intersection. So as you're going over the train tracks of the Needham Heights stop, you see this intersection 20 miles per hour. And then down here is Hillside. And we're gonna kind of, if you're walking here, we're gonna turn right for the remainder of the pictures. So this is Hillside heading towards Webster. So Honeywell is behind us over here, and we're heading towards Webster. Hillside is downhill, and it's a light downhill followed by a steeper downhill. The light downhill is not the problem. It's almost flat. So this is before the problem area. You're driving here down towards Webster. This is Pine Grove on the left. You can see here, this is where it starts to drop off, and that's kind of the problem area. And then when we get to Avery, this is Avery. This is public Avery here, and this is private Avery here. This is where the problem starts. This is the steeper area. Now, it's not as steep as like West Street or something like that, but it's significantly steeper. And you can also see down here at the end, it comes back up. And I think there's a bit of a psychological part of this. Like when you're on a ski slope and you're going down and you see ahead of you that it goes up, you feel you can go a little faster because you know you're going to cut your speed at the end. Cricket Field is right over here. I'll get to that. So people go down this part of Hillside pretty quickly. Now, what isn't there? Any signs. There's no signs here whatsoever. I honestly don't know what the speed limit is. But I will say 30 is about as fast as you should be going on this street. And so if the actual speed limit is above 30, that's too fast. If the speed limit is 30, it just needs to be posted. My hope is that the speed limit is 30.
So it's 30, and it's actually a statewide speed limit based on.
Okay, so 30 is fine. Like if someone's going 28, 29, 30, that's perfectly fine. But what's happening is people are going to go 40, 45 down this, and that's just too fast.
So you think they're traveling faster?
I think they're traveling fast because I mean, so my house is like right about here, and I see this all the time, and so people just fly down here. And this is a bus route. The MBTA bus goes too fast as well. So it's not just private cars; it's also the T.
Have we ever done a speed study on this stretch? No.
Not that I know.
I've never seen one of the speed study things. Either I've never seen the things.
You might not notice that you're not looking there.
No, I know what they are. Yeah.
We don't. I mean, half the time I pass over one.
Yeah. No, I'm well aware of what they look like. I've never noticed one. The entire street was reconstructed from the ground up maybe 15 years ago, and that was great. There used to be a sign near Avery that was like a slow children or a children play sign, maybe about 10 years ago. I think it got hit by a car and was never replaced. So there's my hope is that we can get either or of a speed limit 30 or a slow children, referring to Cricket Field, or maybe both, and just have the awareness of it, because there's no visual indication of that you should be slow. And to the previous point, putting a slow on the pavement here at the start of Cricket Field, that might be interesting as well. So if we then go towards the end and look backwards, so now this is Webster Street behind us. We're looking back up towards Honeywell. So here you can see the slope. So the cars are coming down this way too fast. This is Sunnyside. And of course, this is Cricket Field. Going up the hill, not really a problem. I've not noticed significant speed issues going uphill. And then this is the last picture, the same as here, just zoomed in a bit. So cars come zooming down here. This is maybe a 1/10 of a mile, a 1/4 of a mile. And that's where if we can get some kind of speed limit sign or slow children because of Cricket Field, I think that would totally address the issue.
Do we know what those signs say that I can't see?
These are no parking signs.
No parking, okay.
Yeah.
They look like it.
Is there any regulation? Is there any pre-existing language that we could put up as well?
I mean, if the speed limit is 30, we could put up a sign that says speed limit 30 again.
Yeah.
I noticed was, I see that the ladder type crosswalks the higher speed and the parallel walks. So there is a recognition somewhat of the speed, right?
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, when you're coming in like from Webster here, it's really obvious. You see Cricket Field, you see this crosswalk, but when you're coming down the hill, you can't see Cricket Field from the top of this hill here. You can't see the crosswalk. So that's and you're going downhill. The inclination is to go quickly.
Downhill and straight.
Downhill and straight. It is arrow straight.
So the petitioner showed a picture of a warning sign earlier, the 20 mile an hour. Not as a warning sign, It's an advisory.
And this was just an opportunistic photo. It was just, as I was walking around taking pictures, I'm like, oh,
So
there's
that-
a speed limit
yes.
sign. So this one really isn't relevant too much to.
No, I understand that, but the point is they're making is it's not a black or white sign.
Right.
It is a regulatory sign. Is that something what we can use now?
Yeah, I don't think, I wasn't necessarily envisioning that it would be a yellow one like this one,
That's what I'm trying, but.
Yeah. but it could be.
Well, the
so-
white sign is the regulatory
Yeah.
sign, which can only be posted at the actual, like, there are certain circumstances.
Oh, I
where
see.
If you go in,
I had
if
it.
you
It's not-
see a
yeah, it's
yellow
not-
sign,
I'm
There's-
it's not gonna come.
Right.
You exceed a black and white one, then yes, they can make a legal.
Yeah. I got
But
you.
if the speed limit, if the presumptive speed limit is 30, then we should be able to put a white sign.
My understanding, and unless an engineer challenges me, my understanding is if it's already we said, oh, it's already 30 minutes on, and we posted regulatory signs in what was previously unposted de facto speed limit 30. So I don't think there's an issue putting a regulatory 30 mile an hour sign somewhere on this road that's appropriate.
But do we want to check the speed, the actual speeds first?
Yeah, well, that's.
Yeah,
well, that's where we're
Yeah,
going.
Don't take my word. for it.
No, that's where we're going with it.
If we come out of here tonight with you saying, yes, we'll take a look at it, I'm thrilled.
No, and it's large. I mean, as you said, this road is large. There's no actual room for calming because you can't park the cars. I mean, like, cars are.
You can
cars are-
park, you can park on this side. So
Yeah.
you can park alongside of Cricket. You just can't park
But
across.
this is a big road for 30 miles an hour plus comes up to a park. I mean, honestly.
I think it might be good practice to start putting signage up that alerts that there's a playing
Yes.
surface.
And actually, I would even argue at one point whether this is even a candidate for a speed zone. You know what I mean? Like we did over at Park.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, so,
Because there's one, just going with the information in the room, there's Phytophasio, right? It says there's field ahead or.
Yeah, I know exactly the sign you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That's like a blue
that's,
sign,
I want
right?
that sign.
Yes, that would work.
Anything
is
else?
there a sign that says DeFazio's that there's a park? Is it a blue sign or red sign?
It's a yellow sign.
There are, I can tell you
Yeah,
exactly what it is.
it's a
There
yellow
are,
sign.
there are signs announcing it's like the
Yes.
Fazio Field and school and everything else. I would just caution that signs in themselves are not, there's no research to show that they actually change behavior. I think that's a really critical point moving forward for this location or any others. That signs announce a problem, but they don't actually solve or change behavior. And it just, it doesn't mean you shouldn't put up a sign for some reason here. I just wouldn't expect that people would change their behavior because of the sign.
I mean, like I said, I don't think right now is the appropriate time to discuss speeds.
The lanes are also really wide there.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Like, yeah,
And that's what, so I think the first step, what we did, we told we need the data. So we need to actually see, where do you think, Eric, the speeds are the highest on this road?
I think about, like, if we were to put a speed check pretty close to the intersection at Avery.
Okay.
Like
Uphill or
around-
downhill?
Both ideally, but it's the downhill side that I think is the problem. So I mean, basically this right here is my house. So around where, like, essentially in front of my house or a little uphill from it, this fire hydrant would be a good landmark, but around the Avery intersection would be my pick if we're going to put the little things on the road to check speed.
So let's first figure out what the speed is on that road, because we haven't done anything historically, and then we can address this on old business when we come back with that report. So I would make a motion to do a speed study at Avery and Hillside. Both sides, preferably, but obviously if the tubes are only going halfway, then the downside. My understanding, I thought the tubes were all across both sides, or they only
Both sides.
okay.
We should do both sides.
Yeah. So I make a motion to do a speed study. Seconded. Mr. Tarantino. Any discussion on the matter? Hearing none, we go to a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So yeah, we will study that. They'll come back. It will probably be either next meeting or the meeting after, and then we'll reevaluate and say, you know, whatever controls are necessary to do. And I think also we have to look at, you know, it'll dovetail into that street is just wide, you know what I mean? And a lot of this is perhaps we do, you know, a paint and narrow it, that's your bike lane right there.
I was just gonna say that. I don't understand how we have these, this is a departure, but how we have these super wide streets that could benefit from being less wide, and yet we have the bike lane. Yeah.
But it starts out with the data, so we'll do that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A motion on that?
We did a motion.
Yeah.
Did we speak right?
Yeah.
Or the bike lanes.
Gotta put tubes across.
Oh, the bike lines, I did not do the motion.
Oh, that's.
Again.
The speed study we did a motion. So I just wanted to, Bob, is there any more on the status report that you wanted to kind of bring us through? I know you said we did the.
Well,
I have one question on the status report. On actually a previous one, I don't know if it was on the one you sent out because I forgot to print it, but actually on the subject of country and the turn on country where the paint is. I had thought that we were moving the stop sign there. When I was driving there, I didn't see the stop sign moved.
I can't remember what it was supposed to be. I can't remember right now.
What?
I thought it was.
I think
It was toward the tree, it was being covered by trees or something.
I think it's still, I just oddly have been doing carpool back there, so I've been driving that way a ton lately.
I think we were gonna try and do something in the island, in the painted island.
I think so.
But I don't know if that was.
So right now there's the painted island, and so it's I think it's part of the reason that I'm hearing noise about it is that especially for it impacts the people turning right. So when you're making the turn there, the island makes you kind of go wider and turn, which is good. But when you're coming out, there isn't much of a material difference for someone turning left. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm forgetting the name, like where you're coming out and the painted area is on your left.
I think the hope was that people were gonna follow the paint to make that appropriate left, which was probably more likely than not happening. They're just.
Well, they are,
driving
no, I think
by habit.
The problem is like, now it's narrow, so that when someone's turning right, they're here. So if you're making the left, you're sort of still having to stay to the right, but you're not necessarily seeing the stop sign. I'm just finding that the stop sign is still fairly invisible there.
Gotcha. I agree with that.
Yeah.
The first step was to pilot, just do some paint.
Have you heard from the neighborhood? Yeah.
They're against it.
Yes.
Sounds really
So
exciting.
I explained it to pilot, we're trying
heard.
to shove it down. It's just paint. You can drive over it. The main thing coming from Central Ave to go, it's wide open. The bus stop is on
Is the paint
top
on, or is it
side.
just a-
This is
and
This is
old.
this
So I
is
thought
all,
this
but
moved.
I see.
Okay, so I think it was, so I think it's moved, but now it's so far over to the right. Do you know what I mean? Like I think it's still, I don't know. I would love to see what it looks like now. Because I do think
I might have a picture of it.
Okay.
I think the trouble is probably the best place to put it is like the middle of the road, but I don't know how feasible it
we
is.
would have to take out pavement and
Yeah.
redo.
Can we do barriers?
We could.
the neighborhood will be up in arms, but I just think the stop sign is, it's as if it doesn't exist. I do think the paint makes a difference in the way, certainly when I've been there, it seems to make a difference, but I don't live there, so I don't know how it is.
Is the feedback that it's unattractive, that it's not?
I don't know, I'm hearing noise and half
It's
of the
too
noise
tight.
I'm hearing is from teenagers.
It's too
so-
tight.
Oh, so we
No, from their
created an
parents, it's like teenagers.
oh, got it,
They're
got it,
hearing it
right.
from their parents.
So theoretically, if you behave and don't go over the paint, it feels a little tight. So maybe we'll modify.
I think that might, I think that might be the issue. And then, but I would like to ask that we just sort of evaluate where the stop sign is and if that's optimal.
So
Because
yeah. So can we just kind of reevaluate?
Yeah.
Kind of like it's a pilot, so we'll
Yeah.
reevaluate to see.
Yeah, we would remove pavement. So that's it currently.
Oh, so it looks like it was.
We relocated.
It's
Oh,
too
yeah.
far,
I
so
get
it's
what
like, because someone, you don't come out that far to go left, like it does see,
Well, that's.
Oh, okay. So
Oh,
I
right,
see.
right. I see it.
because the lines are here. The stop, like, the line isn't almost in the right place either. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about that, oh, the cone, are the cones new?
The cones have since been removed.
Okay,
This is the view from this angle.
Stop sign?
yeah, it's that you don't see the stop sign because you're,
It's a matter of adding an advanced stop sign in there. There's an arrow, you know, the arrow. and
Yeah,
stop.
like a stop ahead.
that's a good idea. Something like that, or or paint on the right that brings it a little straighter. It's that curve. It's that the stop sign is over here, but everyone's going left.
Everyone's going left.
So the traffic isn't looking, like, it doesn't make sense when you're at that, especially in the dark. You really can't see it.
Right, so
You
technically,
don't see the stop sign from the advanced stop sign.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm saying I think that makes sense.
so the designers just wanted to do a classic 90-degree stop and stop the traffic, control it.
Mhm.
And it does that. It makes it very annoying, and people are used to, most of them are neighborhood people.
But
Right.
oh, and
Some
they're
want
blowing
it,
it off.
some
I know.
don't. So when we put it in, the ones who want to speed at whatever they're doing to the right are annoyed by it.
Yeah, of course. But then again, it was
But
also one of
The kids crossing the street and their parents are happy with it.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we have to deal with in our profession. And so we can make some adjustments to see if the balance is a little better. But the point was, because it's wide open, say better have crossing to the bus stop for the little kids getting across the
I
street.
just wonder if the yellow line. And again, like I have no business making any of these suggestions, but. But just that it's so curved, again, it's that the road is going this way. So I get you're trying to make the hard right. It's kind of like the Harris intersection. I understand the logic. So maybe this isn't.
So
I think
can
that's
we,
by
I
design
realize
as
this was,
well.
this
The
was
way it
done,
is,
this
it's
was done.
designed to stop traffic.
Yes, and I fully support that. Is there any way that we can, and I don't know how cheap they are, but use like the yellow, because you said it's a problem more at night.
Yeah.
If we could use those kind of reflective yellow,
Bollards.
they're not even
No,
bollard.
they're little-
You nail them into the ground and they
They're
reflect
little
back, so
fluffy.
so at
Yeah.
least gives profile. I see them everywhere. Starting in now, it's never been done anywhere in town. I think it's.
I think I'm in favor of doing those.
Yeah.
As a committee and recommending in the future. In the winter, we're still having anxiety, so we're doing a cultural change as well with these barricades, because now it's all handwork and they're so overworked, so many hours, they freak out. So I would propose when the weather truly breaks, that we do that,
That's fine.
but not in the winter.
And maybe just either an advanced stop and then maybe just a curve, like an advanced stop with like, hey, the road actually just curves. When you're coming from that area.
What's odd is it's doing what was asked by this committee, because it was all about people crossing this wide intersection
Yes.
to get kids to a bus. It did do that. We can modify it. And that's annoying to people who are used to doing
Well, it was about
40 around the
pedestrians in
corner.
general. It was about pedestrians, the people who came
Correct.
or about wanting to go for nice walks in the middle of the
And it was for
street.
people coming down and
Right.
just going, just barreling down. Down the
I'm
road.
actually encouraged by the fact that it's just paint, but they're following.
It's
the
cool.
feedback is that they're
Follow it,
following
right?
the-
I'm telling you, it's
Hey,
very
work.
cool. It's a very cool thing.
So that's, I'm
A lot to
I'm
be
glad
learned from it.
that it's working. And if it's, I'm sure that it's raging some folks, but that's okay. Because what we're doing is for public safety. And
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with that. Maybe just in advance, as we reevaluate, when you come around that corner, just to even indicate now that the road is, it will be profiling on the lane that you're driving, not necessarily the profile of the road. You know what I mean? Of what we're creating. So I think that plus a advanced sign, like.
If this was constructed to today's standards, this would never be that wide open. So we would have, but not as dramatic either. That pavement where the diagonals are, most of that would be gone. And so it would, and then people wouldn't be used to it. So it's changing driver habits. So I don't mind taking those calls. I just try to explain what the committee's goals and objectives were. It came through this committee, it was petitioners. We looked at it, it was compelling, so we're executing some pilots to try to address that issue. That works. But yeah, we'll tweak this as a group and value everybody's input. This is terrific.
No, good. Bob, do you have anything else?
The only thing that I wanted to try to bring up was the new grant for the speed study on first school zones. And just to ask the committee what possible location we should place it. There have been some ideas floated. I just didn't know precisely with this new grant petition where we should place. I just wanted to hear others.
And I want others
opinion
to,
on
but
this.
I actually don't want, because I usually am the one that's dominant, so I'll allow others to feed in.
Could you just explain actually what is the grant?
It's for a speed school zone sign. But now the school zones expand out to high school. And we got a grant to get the 2 signs for 1 location. And just a matter of finding what location would fit best in our particular, Needham's world.
Well, it seems like Webster is a no-brainer.
So I talked to Tom about this earlier today. And on the he got some feedback from GPI, or consultants that were involved with the pedestrian safety audit. And the thinking is that on the Webster side, it might be more appropriate for a safety zone. And then on this side, it might be more appropriate for a school zone. That's based on the pattern of pedestrian traffic. And,
what's the difference?
so the school zone is restricted to the time of school. So the safety zone is like a round the clock pedestrian regulation.
Which means reduction in speed all the time. So like 20 miles an hour on Webster. Is that the point?
It would have to be, it's a process. It's not kind of a blanket regulation, but I think the idea is that, yes, that would be around the clock, around the calendar.
So I agree with that. I agree. I agree. If Webster is a risk all the time, so whatever will allow that to be the case there. But does that allow? But that has nothing to do. What does that have to do with this grant, or does this grant preclude us from doing that, or does that? Because I think whatever we can do on Webster now, we should do. So if we can't get a safety zone on Webster for another 5 years.
I don't disagree with you. My only thought is if that signage could go here, we would actually be helping the school population, and then that crossing nightmare at Dunkin' Donuts and running in, and I'm not saying it would be great. So because this would be 20. This was a.
You're suggesting school zone for this or safety zone when you said this side?
Schools.
School.
This utilizing this grant for this location, but that would be 25 miles an hour.
So I want to clarify that the safety zone is a separate conversation as in terms of the grants. The grant is solely for speed radar and school zone sign, and it is tied to the fact that the school zone was previously disconnected from high school, and now it's been included.
Are we fairly certain that this would meet those 4 criteria in the new manual? Because now that they just released the mass amendments for school zones, and there has to be 4 criteria that have to be met. It has to be, because technically the school isn't on height of that. I remember how before we were talking about we wanted to do a school zone in another area that was on an off street. We said we couldn't do it because the address of the school is not here. Is that an issue here or not?
Look into that part of it.
Well, I have the amendment to the METCD here.
Yeah, we can share.
I mean,
That might not be-
everyone thinks this is the front of the school, so I think we might as well.
I don't agree. I mean, yes.
I would say it's adjacent to school property,
Yeah.
that
It
it
has
should
to
might
be, yes.
meet the criteria. If the
Yes.
state said no, we
I
should
agree.
argue the point,
Yes.
no, it is.
Agreed. And it appears that it is the front of the school.
That's fine.
Get
So
it
I just
done.
want to make sure that this doesn't, what I would like to know since it came up is what is the timeline for making Webster a safety zone while we're on the subject? And what's required for that?
Let's hold, because that's actually a lot simpler process than
Good?
it is. It's actually just we just
Okay.
do it. We've done it before. We've already done a safety zone by what's the
Perry Park.
Perry Park.
Really?
We've already a safety zone, 20 miles an hour all the time now.
Okay,
It's been
so
that way
then
for months.
fine. I agree that do it here, great.
So I just more of an appetite and whatever it is, but that's a lot easier than this because they're getting the grants for these, because these are hardwired, I'm assuming, right? Not the solar.
I would recommend in the future upfront going with that cost and eliminating the solar.
So my thing is on this, if this was a school zone, we are doing an actual real school zone, not the one that's on Central Ave in front of Sunita.
Well, so that was gonna be my next
Because
question.
that's not as cool. I mean, that signage is not compliant at all. It's what consultant told you it was. It's not. But
So I was wondering, is this the opportunity to fix that issue in front of the Sunita?
oh,
Because here, I don't necessarily think it's a speed problem. I think it's a volume with multiple people coming into the area, and it's just, I think there might be another way to fix this area.
Right, well, there's trying
But if we
natural
could
traffic.
utilize the grant to fix and actually make Sunita enforceable.
yes, because that's the issue from your stand, you can't pull anyone over for going.
Right,
the
and to
blinking
give
lights now.
context to the committee, we have had traffic tickets go before the judge in this district. And the tickets have been shot down because somebody's done their homework and found that the signs at the Sunita are not
They're
they're
regulatory
they're not
signs that say
regulatory.
20 miles an hour school days. It's just so ambiguous, and that's not even the context. It's not even what you're allowed to do. You're supposed to say when children are present, or actually do the hours, and it has to be done. There's a specific has to be green and yellow, and it just can't be that, whatever.
But it sounds like the grant is much more comprehensive than just swapping signs. So can we figure out how to fix the signs as a separate, at Sunita? If it's just signs at Sunita that are the problem.
It's actually this 20 mile an hour sign. The problem, you just pull those off. You already have a school zone, and you're within a speed zone.
Well, that was the problem. There's conflicting.
Yes.
They're
You'll have to put
conflicting.
an end to school zone, and
Right.
then yes, there's some nuance there that has to be done. But
So can we fix that? But it sounds like that's not worth a grant.
because you already have radar signs there. You already
Right.
have.
So that's okay. So that answers my
Okay.
question.
That
So
answers
the
that.
grant, so the grant here.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say,
Yeah.
yes, this has
So
already been
can I- so then
identified in
can I
the
ask a-
engineering study.
Can I ask a
Okay.
follow-up question? So if this becomes a 25 mile an hour school zone, 20, is it possible to then actually put in a crosswalk across
That's in the plan.
with the grant?
Bump out,
Yeah,
bump
Cool.
out and a crosswalk, somewhere between the two stairways.
somewhere down the hill where they tend to
So we
walk
lose a
across.
couple spaces, not a big deal, but there'll be a bump out so the
Okay.
pedestrians can see the
Great,
It's doing the same thing.
vehicles, drivers can see them, proper bump outs, pinch it down.
perfect.
Because that would be perfect.
Okay.
That's a much longer range plan though than this, the purposes of this. Because that's in the tip.
That's in the tip, right? Yeah.
That's in the tip. We're in a stall right now for various reasons and looking at the parking study the town's doing. So we were asked to hold off on moving it forward.
So the kids will just,
No, we can also use the barrier. We can do the barriers at that point too. Once
Okay.
if we do that, we can do the barriers into the crosswalk. I think knowing that that's no longer, I'd rather do that because that's a tragedy waiting to happen too. Is everything this road right here is.
yes, the problem is that it won't
Kids will
necessarily,
never-
right.
So this would be a signalized school crossing? The signalized school crossing?
You mean the 20 mile an hour blinking lights, right?
Yeah. This the,
Yeah,
And a radar signage.
and the engineering firm, I think, recommended the RRFDs.
yeah.
If it's down to a low speed.
Mhm. roundabouts are not part because you said that part of the tip, but you can recreate.
Well, the grant,
that.
we could put them in and then redo it.
So then you have the whole shebang.
Or tie into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to know by the 18th, that's what that is this is.
Your application is due by the 18th.
But if we were to do a pilot with the barricades and lose spaces, at very minimum, we need to notify the businesses, of course, that because when we did it on the other ones, we didn't take any spaces. That was very controversial at Highland and on at Great Plain at Maple.
Maple, yeah, I was trying.
Great plan.
Yes, that's why we can't do the other crosswalk, because it requires 4 parking spaces. 3 maybe, 2 to be removed, yes. Yep.
Okay. So do we need to vote on this, or are you?
Oh,
Seems like we have
just for the
consensus.
opinion of.
This was an advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just an about, yeah, that's, I would say this is
Yes.
probably a
Good.
good place for it. And then try to wrap it into whatever grant you can do. Because if you can, we don't want to wait for the tip, but then you can backfill that with something else.
Yeah.
Have that.
And we want to make sure that wherever we do this, the pilot, we can observe are people actually going to use it. I mean, high school kids just kind of flow wherever
we
they
want
want.
it. They
I
don't
mean,
use it, then
I'm guilty of it myself, but I'm not gonna throw the kids under the bus completely. I park and walk right.
Everyone's
across
done
the
it,
street.
though. Yeah. No,
So say that again for now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So, so as far as Sunita, should we add that to a future agenda item? As far as the fixing that?
I think that might be good. I'll go by and find out, and I'll talk to the our motor officer who's had issues with that, and find out what the fix needs to be.
Okay.
And
Yes.
Because
I
it sounds like
actually-
that should, it sounds
Yeah.
like it's not that hard to do, and it sounds like it needs to be fixed, so we should just.
It's in black
Understand
and
it.
white. It's the end school zones is what we need to put, because then it begins the speed zone again, because you're back into 35.
there was it. Well, that's where I might need engineering's assistance, because I believe Tony's opinion was that because it's a marked speed route, you couldn't put an end school zone.
Get another
But
opinion.
how-
Because
Get
it's
another
not-
opinion.
it's in the
So
manual.
yeah, so is it possible, if there's a school zone, then it has to end at some point.
And school zone.
So,
Yeah.
It's in the manual. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure end school zone, end speed zone is.
so it might be just as simple as putting in end school zone and removing whatever the signage that I will go discover when needs to be.
Yeah, I think that's.
because I think if you read the new manual
the
that
new
came
one.
out today, whatever it was last week, it specifically says a school zone within a posted speed zone. This is what needs to be done. It just gives those,
Oh,
and says you have to have these tabs at the end, at the beginning, and
Yeah.
end. So that's what you're doing is you're allowing motorists to say that this 20-mile-an-hour reduction during a certain time, that's where this ends. But if you're in that zone at 12 o'clock at night, you're in the regulatory speed zone. And so that's just,
Yeah, okay.
it just goes that.
Clarification.
It's clear.
Yeah, right. So anyway, so I know this is toward the end of the night. So, looking at that, so actually, so I sent everyone minutes and videos of the select board meeting from December. Last night, they did vote on the charge for the Transportation Safety Committee. So this exists. No one's appointed to it. It's just kind of empty, but it has a charter. I don't know. I have to talk to Kate and find out and Karis and find out what the timeline is for nominations. The select board will have to nominate certain folks onto this committee, but this committee's charge is, and I can have it made available again, or you can look in your emails, but it's really to evaluate, make recommendations to DBH, and actually DPW. It actually allows DPW to do a lot of the work on their own ahead of time. If you notice, if you read it, it actually says that the petitions that come in, if it's something that you guys can do on your own, you don't need to go to the committee. And
It's just a warning sign.
yeah, exactly. But if something is not regulatory or anything, and you
Non-regulatory,
don't have to wait for that, you can do it within the governance of whatever, the DPW. So and then if If it's new infrastructure, then it would go up depending upon the cost, et cetera. So it's all in this that's been approved by the select board.
Well,
So
can I ask a question? What wasn't clear to me, I read it and it sounds interesting, is the sort of this general scope of this, the speeds within the town. And this issue that comes before us every month. Whose purview is that? And how are we having, what is the bird's eye view into prioritization and scope and all of that?
Yes, great question. That is in this other committee that cannot be formed until the transportation committee has been, so because there's another committee, the transportation committee, which has kind of an overall, that's going to be more of the higher strategic. It's actually called the mobility planning and coordination committee. That is a committee that it will be select board level kind of, formulation, but there's a current committee that's in the bylaws that has to be dissolved by town meeting. And so Kate's decision was she will formulate this committee to kind of replace TMAC to what they're doing going on. Then this other committee is already on the agenda for town meeting to be, at least the transportation committee would be eliminated. And I don't know what Kate's planned to then bring that in, whether that's going to go on at the same time. It doesn't need town meeting's approval. It can be done by the select board. But the select board specifically last night, Kate only was putting this up. So I'm sure she has a plan for why or when timing wise, but there's another committee that essentially there's the Rail Trail Advisory Committee. There's this committee that both will sit on this other committee that then will bring in planning, will bring in schools, will bring in other aspects of the town to formulate and advise on speed management, kind of holistic transportation. Do we want a 40-mile-an-hour, do we want 40-mile-an-hour speeds in our town? No. Okay, that will go into a comprehensive speed management plan that will be probably written by DPW, et cetera. And that will be the framework for the work that the Transportation Safety Committee then will be able to do.
Is this how all towns do this? It just sounds so complicated.
This is actually, I think, probably the 50th percentile. There was a committee that formulated this that is now dissolved, that we looked at Braintree, Brockton, from the city perspective, we looked at Wellesley, we looked at probably 10 different towns on how they did their transportation, and some were good, some were not, some were similar.
That's what it is at Brookline, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. There is probably more a planning. There's more planning board kind of body. But then let's say there was transportation committee was really more although it was more regulatory, we could make regulations. It was more like TMAC. So, but we had a broader purview because we had almost anything that moved in town was part of this. There are cabs, change regulations, parking stuff that happened.
Right.
More.
I mean, I think that ultimately the select board did not vote to give up their ability to make those decisions because that's the regulatory. So when it's still advisory, it's a step more than what we can do. We can get funding. The intention is to get funding from town meeting, and being able to do more than we do now. But ultimately, it comes to that we can only do stuff that's not regulatory. We can always recommend it.
And so you'll find out what the timeline is for the second piece?
Yes.
Because I think that's the piece, and I just feel like it's really important that people bring these concerns forward, but clearly as we hear month after month, they're the same concerns. And across all the major streets, across the side streets, the small streets, the neighborhoods, we have speed issues and we have pedestrian safety issues.
Yes.
And so having a master plan for dealing with it with a clear timeline to implement these things is really important.
So in the charter of the other committee is at least a minimum of 2 to 3 meetings a year that have this committee, and that's the thing, we're gonna go over as a working group to kind of go over these larger issues and how do we handle strategically, what are we going to do. So this isn't always going to be, this committee isn't always 12, it's not 12 meetings a year of just hearing petitions. It'll be, the cadence will be less. We'll be having 3 meetings of our 12 that will be part of this larger planning group. It's a way to simplify
policy. It's also developed townwide policy that'll help this committee, that'll help the community. Other towns have Board of Public Works, for example. They go back and forth with DPW, help look townwide, and if they support it, and they have political cover and they move forward. And DPW focuses more on the implementation. So those boards and committees that I'm aware of in other towns, I think is super valuable. And this thing might grow. It's going to be,
and that's what that mobility planning and coordination committee is. That strategic one to basically give political covers, DPW and others to be able to prioritize some of these things. Why are, you're 71 miles of sidewalk? Why are we, this next year we're going to do this, this, and this, and then so it's not always you guys having to make that decision, then suddenly pick up the phone from 10 angry residents, kind of thing. So
we'll still have
that. We'll still have it. You can tell them it's well.
It'll always happen.
It's true.
But having the vision, townwide policy is helpful to everyone, and I think the town needs it.
Yep.
And I hope that part of the scope of this committee too is communication, because I think that's always where the town gets stuck, is that the communication about what's happening and considering the it's a perfect example. The town common.
Yes.
It's a perfect example.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will. Do we have a town communication person?
We do have a PIO for the last 2 years.
As the TIP process goes through for Highland Avenue, the town decides not to pursue or breaks it out strategically. But as we go forward and have public meetings, is this committee also going to vet the design and hold public meetings to help?
The intention is to have input. I don't know if it'll be sign off, but it will be, it will go in front of the mobility planning committee. You will have, I think, 1 or 2 representatives from this committee that sit standing on that committee. Voting members of that committee. There'll be 1 or 2 from planning board, there'll be 1 or 2 from school committee, et cetera, that will basically to be able to have input on that. So that's
a diverse group, which is very good, gets kicked around a lot of it.
And then the intention of the traffic safety committee will be the forward public facing. This is, we'll still go forward and take in what we normally do from all the residents and try to come up with solutions. And if something that's long term, we do know that if it's long term, we know we have input into the committee to be able to more efficiently.
And you could follow the updates from the beaches of Florida.
The ocean side.
Justin doesn't think that.
I love the ocean. Especially when it's 80 degrees.
Can I make a motion?
We can do that on their own.
Yeah.
This new-
Yeah. There's already a regulation.
We have a motion to adjourn unless there's any other.
I mean, I'm on till midnight, so.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second? No, it doesn't need a discussion. Motion to adjourn. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you.
9:19.
Pleasure.